Tonight on the program, two disturbing Auditor General reports, yet again painting a bleak picture of municipalities' management of taxpayers' money. In the first report, Tsakani Maluleke says the situation has deteriorated from what it was in 2015-2016 when the current administration took over. What is even more troubling, she says, is that there are simply no measures in place to remedy the numerous accountability failures identified by her office over the years. Of the country's 257 municipalities, only 27 received clean audits. A second report looking at how municipalities managed COVID-19 relief funds unsurprisingly documents a litany of irregularities, deficiencies and service delivery failures. Auditors identified poor internal controls as well as indicators of potential fraud, which of course would have to be further investigated by other state law enforcement agencies. Tsakani Maluleke, the Auditor General, is on standby to talk us through her report. A little later, we ask the chairperson of the parliamentary committee tasked with playing an oversight role just how they intend holding the culprits to account. He'll be joined by the CEO of the SA Local Government Association, who will tell us what members of his organization have resolved to do to arrest and reverse the unsettling situation that the AG report has documented. The Watchdog starts now. Well, let's welcome from Johannesburg, Auditor General Tsakani Maluleke. Good evening, Ms. Maluleke. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the program this evening.
Good evening, Vuyo. It's such a pleasure to join you this evening, and good evening to the viewers at home.
Great. Now, only 27 of our municipalities could get clean, unqualified audits. That's tragic.
Yes, indeed. We recorded 27 clean audits for the local government sphere this year. We noted that it is an improvement on last year's 20 clean audits. However, when we reflect on the four-year journey of this administration, we note that they inherited 33 clean audits at the beginning of 2016-17, and now they're going to end off their term of leading municipalities with only 20 clean audits. So we're seeing a deterioration, not just in the number of clean audits, but also when we look at the levels of financial management disciplines, at the performance information that we look at as well, and as well as the area of compliance with key laws and regulations, particularly as it relates to supply chain and procurement management. So we are seeing a deterioration when we look at the four-year period.
And you're saying these municipalities have not managed, to do or master the basics. That's even more troubling, isn't it?
Well, what we've been cautioning against is the reliance on costly short-term solutions to deal with the journey of preparing financial statements to be submitted for audit purposes. And when we noted that there were only 28% of municipalities that could submit financials of a good quality for us to audit, what it tells us is that the disciplines of managing finances during the course of the year, the disciplines of reporting on how finances and how the budget is being managed, those disciplines are clearly quite weak across many municipalities, and particularly in the context where there is a much greater need to ensure that whatever rands we have in our hands are being managed as prudently and as effectively as possible. It is absolutely urgent that these disciplines be institutionalized, monitored, and supervised on a regular basis.
Have you been able to put a finger on the reasons for the people who are responsible for managing the finances of municipalities not being able to do so, and then subsequently employing these consultants who, on a short-term basis, some of them are able to actually do the books, but in many instances, as your report notes, even with the consultants, I mean, they still fall short. They're unable to submit their reports on time. You don't get answers to the questions that you're asking.
Well, we've noted that more than 3/4 of municipalities rely on consultants to help them put financials together. Our major concern is not so much on the idea of relying on consultants to compile financials, but more on the notion that year on year, you rely on consultants to help you put the very basic financials together.
Which is why I'm asking whether it's a question of skills.
Well, what we're finding is that indeed it's a question of skills. It's not a question of vacancies. It's rather a question of skills and discipline. The discipline of managing records monthly, quarterly, on a half-yearly basis and on an annual basis. Because the real issue is not so much about the stuff that's complex. It's about the notion that you can't operate out of a bank account and not maintain records of what it is you're spending public funds on. The MFMA is very clear. It places on the accounting officer, that's the municipal manager, a key responsibility to ensure that they maintain full records, credible records that are going to support whatever financial information they put to us at the end of the year. And what we're raising is that all too often, the records that should support what financial information is being submitted, those records are not there. And that's why we've issued disclaimer audit opinions year on year. And in this year, we've taken the matter forward. We've actually issued notifications of material irregularities on those municipal managers who year on year fail to provide us with records that demonstrate how they've spent public funds. So that's us implementing the new powers that have been given to us to help enforce accountability in the public sector.
And I'm going to get into that in a short while. But just staying a little bit with the issue of skills. How much of that has got a lot to do with wrong appointments, or underqualified people being employed at the insistence of political principals?
Well, the accounting officer maintains the key responsibility to ensure that the people employed in that municipality are those that have the skills, the competence, and that they are supervised and held accountable for doing that which is expected. And if the accounting officer fails to do that, if the municipal manager fails to do that, then the council has the duty to hold them accountable. So what we're seeing is that, yes, there are people employed, and they simply don't have the skills that are required. And also even the basics, Vuyo, they are not doing because they're not being supervised and held accountable for the regular disciplines of putting financial records together on a regular basis. So our view is that, yes, it's a problem of skills, but it's also one about discipline, and it's one about accountability in the hands of the accounting officer, but also in terms of the council fulfilling their duty to hold the accounting officer to account.
Do you think, or do you believe, or have you been able to establish whether, in fact, councillors themselves have what it takes to be able to interrogate, the stuff that comes before them, so that they are able to hold their officials accountable?
What we're finding is that all too often they don't do it. The MPACs aren't able to do what's required. The councils don't do what's required. And as a result, you've got accounting officers not being held to account. The job of oversight is not a necessarily technical one. It's really one about staying with the matter and knowing the key questions to be asked. And you'll know that we've harped on this story for quite a long time and found tools and even published tools to help those charged with oversight responsibilities to do their work, and equipping them with information on the type of questions to pose to accounting officers. But what we're finding is that they're not doing that which we believe is possible.
Mm-hmm. In fact, a bottom line perhaps is, being able to demand simple answers to simple questions, really.
In many ways, that's a key issue, yes.
Now, it is obviously an indictment on the a part of this current crop that started or took over in 2016, that they inherited 33 clean audits, which they have now reduced to 27, which in itself, 33 wasn't great either. It was a very low standard by itself. The question then is, what can people still do about these problems that are repeating themselves over and over again? And it's not like they have been short of advice, because your office has consistently, year in and year out, given them advice about very specific things to do to deal with these financial losses, fraud and corruption, misuse of public resources, and service delivery failures.
We've positioned this report as being directed to the leadership that's going to take over the responsibility of leading local government beyond the forthcoming elections. And we've positioned it as saying to the new leadership that please ensure that you set the right tone at the top. Make sure that you prioritize key practices that are going to uphold the principles of good governance and accountability. Make sure that you set up an administration staffed by men and women that have the skills, the competence, the discipline, the ethics to do that which is required. And make sure that you then hold them accountable for implementing the key controls that are going to help you make sure that you deploy the taxpayer funds appropriately and benefit citizens through your work. And when they don't do that, hold them accountable. And by implementing consequences swiftly and consistently. So the message that we're sending out is really targeted at this new leadership to say, take your duty seriously and set up an administration that's going to protect these institutions and run these institutions so that they do serve South Africans.
Okay, Dr. General, I'm going to ask you to hold your thoughts right there. We're going to take a quick ad break. This conversation continues right after this. Welcome back. This is the Watchdog. We're talking to the Auditor General, Tsakane Maluleke, on the back of two reports that her office submitted or tabled before Parliament today. One, of course, was the general state of financial affairs across the country's 257 municipalities. And the second report was about monies spent during this COVID-19 period, where municipalities got a lot of money to help communities cope better with the pandemic. And that's where I want us to go right now, Ms. Maluleke. Your report still finding a lot of irregularities, deficiencies, and service delivery failures, poor internal controls, and perhaps even more disturbing indicators of potential for fraud.
Yes, that's correct, Vuyo. So in the course of looking at the expenditures of the COVID-19 relief fund, we audited 43 municipalities right across the country. And we looked at their expenditure for the period up until the end of December, and we audited that in detail. We also reviewed their own submissions of information around how they spent the COVID-19 relief funds up until the end of March 2021. And the key findings relate to matters around procurement, around planning and needs assessment practices. They relate to project management and coordination of different projects, such that, for example, when there are projects of procuring and installing water tanks, the right suppliers are chosen, the workmanship of those suppliers is inspected and confirmed before payments are made. And then also the people who offer the tankering services are not only procured appropriately and allocated contracts appropriately, but their service delivery is confirmed before payments are made, so that you're not paying for water tanks not being filled, right? So it is those practices that really are about procurement, contract management, program management, performance management, expenditure management that we found let us down throughout many initiatives within local government as they sought to deal with the pandemic. When we look at these things, we recognize that they are consistent with the same issues we raise when we look at the year-end accounts. It's the same weaknesses around financial management, performance management.
Which shouldn't be surprising.
Yes, so the reports sort of feed into one another, such that even though the year-end report relates to a year that ended 12 months ago today, the procurement issues have persisted over the more recent period.
Have you referred any cases to other state law enforcement agencies?
Yes, you'll know that with the amendments to the Public Audit Act, we're now required to issue a material irregularity notification to any accounting officer where we found a non-compliance, and we can link that non-compliance to financial loss or to substantial harm or to the harm of a public sector institution. So in the same way as when we audited the provincial and national government initiatives on COVID-19, we will share the findings, the observations, the data analytics with the Fusion Center. You'll remember that in the context of the work we did last year, we shared this information with the Fusion Center. And you've seen that the matters around PPE are being dealt with, the matters around people who tried to defraud SASA or defraud the UIF, all of those have even reached the dock in some instances. And we've also had the recovery of funds, which is really important. We'll do the same thing.
Have the powers your office was given over a couple of years ago made any material difference? Have they helped in any meaningful way?
Oh, absolutely. So let me start here with the COVID-19 work that we did last year. Just simply being able to issue these findings to accounting officers and have them respond for us is a good indication that the work we do is having a direct impact on improving accountability. In other instances, we've referred matters. I'll give you an example. In Machabeng, just over a year ago, we had a material irregularity identified relating to a stormwater system construction contract. And when we issued this material irregularity notification, this particular didn't take us too seriously. So what we've done is referred the matter to the Hawks, and they've just recently accepted that referral. So what I'm saying is that the impact is that where accounting officers respond quickly, they're able to recover funds, as I've indicated in the context of the COVID-19 work from last year. They're able to put people in the dock and make sure that law enforcement processes take their course. And then they're also able to deal with the internal control issues that resulted in problems. In the context of the COVID-19 work, you saw people fixing controls so that by the time they went back to implement their improved controls, things ran better. In other instances, we've had monies recovered and we've had matters referred to law enforcement. So what we're saying is that there is an impact to our instrument. We've only been implementing this for 2 years. In the first year, we implemented this at only 9 municipalities. In this second year, we've implemented it at 57 municipalities. And so we've had already 96 material irregularities notified to accounting officers. And that's really important because it tells you that the system, when given these MIs, does respond. People do take control. They do take the necessary action. In Mogalakwena, we had a material irregularity notified to that accounting officer relating to a stadium, the Moshate Stadium. And there was 13 million rand of a financial loss that we calculated due to an irregularity. And what they've done is they were quick about getting an investigation completed. They are already disciplining officials, and there is already a process underway to pursue the collection of the funds that were lost. So we are seeing progress.
Okay, and I have to ask you this. I know I have to let you go because you have another appointment, but I have to ask you this because you are saying that the situation is dire in certain municipalities to a point that about a quarter of the municipalities won't be able to do what they are supposed to do. And what is more disturbing is the fact that from your report, you are seeing these serial offenders, for whom there appears to be no consequences whatsoever. I can talk, for example, about, provinces like the Free State and the Northwest, which came through as probably the worst of the bunch. Yet on the other hand, you have other provinces like your Western Cape and the Northern Cape, which seems to be really putting a great deal of effort in ensuring that they do the right thing. But talk to us about, this over a quarter or so of municipalities that in the near future you reckon may not be able to deliver services to millions of South Africans.
Thank you, Vuyo. So that over a quarter of municipalities are those that themselves disclose in their own financial statements their own concerns about their ability to continue to operate. So it says that they are under significant financial pressure, and that is a recognition by them as municipalities. What it tells you is that the financial pressures of local government are getting worse. This was over 12 months ago. In the last 12 months, you've had the full year's impact of COVID-19 and the lockdowns. And so we believe that the financial health of municipalities is likely to have deteriorated even further. And what it then calls upon all of us to do is to drive vigilance in managing the diminishing funds that are available to us so that we can stretch the rand. The space for leakage is gone. There can simply be no more tolerance for inefficiency, for wastage of funds, for lack of delivery. And you've seen that the impact on the lived experiences of citizens is dire. You've seen how some of these municipalities that disclose that they themselves have a going concern problem, they have a financial health problem, that they can't deliver services. And as a result, you've got service delivery protests happening. So we do need to deal with great urgency with the journey of sorting out financial management and sorting out the integrity and performance and therefore the sustainability of the local government sphere.
Madam Auditor General, thank you so much for your time this evening. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Vuyo.
That's the Auditor General, Tsakane Maluleke. Up next, we'll speak to the chairperson of the parliamentary committee tasked with playing an oversight role on how they intend holding the culprits to account. He'll be joined by the CEO of the South African Local Government Association, who will tell us what members of his organizations have resolved to do to arrest and reverse the unsettling situation that the AG has thus described. The Watchdog continues right after this. Welcome back. This is the Watchdog. Let's welcome now Mr. Sakumzi Somyo, who is the chairperson of the ad hoc committee on the Auditor General, as well as Mr. Xolile George, who is the CEO of the South African Local Government Association. Good evening to both of you, gentlemen. You heard what the Auditor General just said. You have read the report, both of you. It paints a rather sorry state of the country's municipalities and how they are managing their affairs. What must be done now, Mr. Somyo?
Well, thank you very much, Vuyo, and your listeners. The AG in your program has attested to the fact that the municipalities have presented themselves in a very sort of state of their own financial accountability. What we have done as the committee, we have been part of a team which constitutes the Auditor General's Standing Committee, SCOPA, and the committee which deals with local government in a majority of instances, which is a COCTA responsibility. We have included as part of the tree the committee which deals with appropriation, because here we are talking about money. And in a substantive way, we had to look into key areas which ought to be attended to as a matter of urgency, and those for the medium to long term. One instance is that if a municipality receives the audit findings which have been disclaimed, it tells a story about its own management, while including generally about the entirety of the leadership of that institution. So we're directing that the MECs who are responsible for such provinces, where those municipalities are found, we have seen a number of provinces spread right through in their own benefit in the wrong side of accountability by such municipalities. That both the accounting officer, which is the municipal manager, and as well the chief finance officers must be held responsible and accountable for such. There is no way that we should accommodate a scenario where the municipality would spend the residents' contribution for service delivery to hire consultants, and after it all, they present a sorrow story of such a financials, which can be read. There's no proof in terms of the expenditure, and therefore, we need to go where it matters most, where the accountability resides, so that those who are responsible are made accountable. They are there. They are not part of the elections. They'll be found in those municipalities as a matter of urgency. The second instance is the instance that relates to those who ought to make municipalities to account. There is a committee which deals with spending in municipalities, which ought to look into each and every instance where things have gone wrong. And such committees have been found to be lacking in the scrutiny of such financials. So our proposition has been that since those are constituted by politicians, and politicians, their term has come to an end as they are facing local government elections. In the new term, we must see all those committees receiving thorough training by alignment of the ideas as expressed by SALGA as well as COCTA. And once we see the strength of those committees, we're going to see a sense of institutionalized accountability, which is within institutions, not away from such institutions.
Can I just,
our hope.
Can I just come in quickly, Mr. Somyo? Because yes, you say you're going to bring together the other committees like SCOPA, the local government, the COCTA, the portfolio committee that has oversight over COCTA, as well as the appropriations committee. Now, these committees have always existed. Yes, perhaps in not in a united fashion, but each has tried to sort of do the little that they can do in their respective little corners. But the fact of the matter is that none of what they did actually yielded the kind of result that South Africans would like to see. And I guess people would also want to know that, I mean, people like you, after the 2019 elections, you all went in there and took over portfolios whose problems you knew very, very well. The question is, before the the Auditor General could even come, what are the things that you did proactively? What did you put in place before you knew that we're going to sing the story we're singing, the song we're singing today about how bad things are? What did you do proactively as people who went in there with a mandate to say, over the next 5 years of this administration, these are the things that we're going to do differently?
Yes, Fio. You know what has happened is that these various committees have gone in various provinces, visiting both municipalities and provincial departments of COGTA. Something which we have done, all of us. We have been traveling through these provinces where we have identified municipalities, in the main, those who are not doing well and those who are under administration by provincial governments. And our findings thereafter were taken to both the MECs and the premiers of such provinces, who were advised about what we have found and what is it that such leadership should intervene as a matter of urgency to see a sense of stability installed in such administrations.
Did they do what you asked them to do? Did they do what you asked them to do? Did the premiers come on board? Did the MECs do what you asked them to do?
In terms of our interactions, they agreed to take such instances within their own ambits. But the results of audits are showing us something else.
Exactly.
Which is indicative of the fact that all of us, while we have done what we have tried to do, it looks like we are far away from these places where accountability needs to take place. And that responsibility resides solely within the jurisdiction of those municipalities who must show cause of why they can't meet the intended purpose.
Okay,
It is indicative even further of the fact that the qualitative instance of what would have been pulled through in terms of visible changes which ought to deal with these matters ought to be more experienced at the local level.
Okay.
So that's where we must somewhat pay particular attention at.
Let's bring in the CEO of SALGA here. Mr. George, it should really, what the two reports that the Auditor General tabled before Parliament today should pain, any self-respecting public representatives. Do you get a sense? Do the councillors who form SALGA, who meet every year in an assembly and discuss these issues, are they serious about these matters?
Good evening, Vuyo, and good evening to all the SABC viewers of your program. Indeed, it's a very concerning state of affairs, Vuyo, in the sense that we should not look at these results from the lens of 2019-2020, nor should we look at it only in the instance of the last 5 years.
Precisely.
The local government system in its current form is now 20 years, from year 2000. And when you look at the objects of local government as outlined in the Constitution, that is to provide democratic and accountable government, to ensure basic services to communities, to provide sound financial management, and promote economic development and sustainable development. All those 5 objects, local government path for the last 20 years has been digressing. To be honest, we have been digressing from those objects. The second part of our problem that we have noticed for the last 20 years is that there's been factors that have contributed to a decline on 2 fronts. The first front is financial sustainability of local government, and the second one is a paradox. Firstly, for the entire 20 years, local government has been succeeding tremendously in providing basic services to communities. Yet, on the same sentence, local government quality services have been declining. And most of those factors are both internal to the municipality as an institution, others are external. The internal ones are within our control. The first one is the institutional capacity, which has been constantly declining, the level of governance, which has been poor in many instances, as well as level of performing oversight and appointing competent people. So when you look at the appreciation of contributing to successes around providing basic services, local government, no doubt, has been proven to have provided services to many communities successfully, water, electricity, and so on. But the question of reliability and the quality of maintenance has been poor. I think at the core of what AG is saying, Vuyo, is that leadership at local government has been of poor quality, both at the level of taking action when there's clear instances of failure to perform the task that officials are required to do, and also failure to perform oversight. So we are quite happy as SALGA that part of our observation for failure to perform oversight has been a number of areas where we think that if we improve on the quality of leadership that is brought in local government, hopefully from this year after the elections, political parties would be very central to choosing leaders that will be capable of appreciating the gravity of the task at hand and the magnitude of their responsibilities. Because once we have the right quality political leadership, we have no doubt that it would have the 80% kind of impact, meaning that the quality leadership that we are yearning for would be able to appoint the right official. So when AG says we are spending 6 billion rand in the finance department, and correspondingly we spend 1.2 billion rand on appointing consultants. So the question that needs to be asked and is very pertinent to leaders at every municipality is, on what basis do we still have CFOs whose title is to maintain financial management, but they are unable to do the most basic of the task, to produce financial statements? And year in, year out, it's 5 years now in certain municipalities, you have consistent disclaimers, but there's those senior officials, municipal managers and CFOs remain in their position. So those are internal factors where the right leadership would be able to set the right tone and make sure that we don't have a situation where we continue as SALGA providing training, providing guidance, providing tools, but correspondingly, you are sitting with instances where there's a system-wide failure to execute accountability and consequence. The last point I want to raise is on what we regard as SALGA as the need for extracting accountability to arrest the malaise. And how do we extract accountability? The National Executive Committee of SALGA, for 2 years in a row from last year, took a very clear stance that despite the normal advice, which is consistent with our mandate, providing advice, providing support, there's clear failure that is evident on actioning the corrective measures that AG so aptly advises all of us to do. So the NEC of SALGA last year, and most recently as last week, took a decision that says the system must extract accountability in local government, meaning that when you look at the 3 spheres of government, we are all defined in terms of Section 40 of the Constitution to be characterized as interdependent, interrelated, yet distinct. So when there is a failure at a local government level, there's a corresponding obligation for province and national to provide the remedial support measures in terms of the Constitution, Section 154 support measures, which so far have been provided, no doubt, but yet ineffective because some of them are misdirected in terms of proper diagnostic of what needs to be done and responding timely on those. The second one is internal to the municipality. So the question of transferring resources to municipalities where there's clear evidence that there's failure to manage finances. So SALGA leadership said we need to ask the departments who are responsible for transferring funds to do what the law expects them to do. The national departments, provincial departments are supposed in terms of PFMA, Section 38J, to make sure that before you even transfer funds, satisfy yourself that the institution has got transparent systems, has got sufficient checks and balances, has got preventative measures. But so far, we have not been very bold in ensuring that we can't have a municipality where Auditor General says we gave them 6 billion rand. And by the time we carried out the audit, we could not relate between the money transferred and what was found on the account. And yet, come July 2021, we will transfer those funds to those municipalities with such track record. So we think that the system is designed sufficiently to ensure that it can force corrective measures. But I think we have not been able to robustly ensure that those two. So going forward, we think as SALGA, we are quite happy that the public accounts committees at municipalities, Parliament has now passed law that allows them to work similar to the parliamentary public accounts committees to ensure that they can have sufficient degree of independence to perform investigations, report direct to council, to make sure that they can be able to force administration to perform its task, and will play likewise as SALGA to be ready to provide requisite support.
Okay, very, very quickly, Mr. George. I mean, as SALGA, you meet with COCTA. The deputy president has been involved. There is a whole committee, that meets fairly regularly to discuss these sorts of issues. And from what I'm hearing, you are putting the blame squarely on how the local sphere of government is resourced, whether or not it is adequately resourced and gets the requisite support. But aren't you getting any joy from those meetings that you're having where everyone who has a responsibility to make sure that local government works is part of?
Well, it's not a matter of not getting joy, Vuyo. We think as SALGA, the financial management system of our country, the intergovernmental relations system of our country is sufficiently robust in terms of inbuilt instruments. So in other words, where there is evidence of a lack of capacity, the other two spheres are enjoined to provide support in terms of 154 of the Constitution.
But
and
do
many
they
of
do
them
that?
have been doing that.
But do they do that?
They do that. However, the interventions are not tailor-made in our view, and this has been proven through empirical evidence where we have assessed across the board the kind of support provided. So it means the remedial measures are there, but they are not sufficiently tailored to respond adequately to the issues at hand. For instance, look at the report, Vuyo, that AG has released. 22 municipalities received disclaimers out of those municipalities. And in those 22 municipalities, more than 8 municipalities have been under administration for more than 4 times, more than 3 times, more than 2 times. So it means when there's intervention, it means another instrument has been used, Section 139, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is in the Constitution. But the kind of impact that is expected may be based on remedial instruments that are not appropriate to the task at hand. So we're saying there has been support, but the first and foremost key issue for us, View, in our observation, is that the system itself inside municipalities, if we get the right leadership quality, it will set the tone to self-correct first before it is even policed by other spheres. We need to get the right quality leadership to make sure that consequences, when we have managers who are not doing their work, the political leadership would ensure that appropriate support and action is taken swiftly and consistently to extract accountability and consequences. Okay,
gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to stay right there. I'm going to bring in SANCO Chairperson Abraham Mashishi Metsweding as we continue this conversation looking at the state of municipal finances. Sir, let me ask you, as an organization that is supposed to be a civic body, really looking after the interests of communities, have you been doing that?
Thank you very much, Will, and also let me thank to the viewers of 405 to this program. I really appreciate the invite. This is not just a space of time, but as a Grand Force soldier, I'll always be combat ready. Look, as far as the issue of finances are concerned, in terms of the local municipality around the country, it's a very challenge whereby since 1994, we speak about capacity. Whereas we know now it's no more the issue of capacity, it's the issue of corruption and making sure that people are just working on for their own girlfriends and nyatis and slave queens, you name them. Because it worries as Sanko particularly that we are trying to raise our voice to say, on these municipalities, we find the disclaimer, as my brother have already mentioned, poor performance from the city, municipality in different spheres, whereby money have been returned back. And we have realized as the community to say this tender system is the one that caused the problem.
But what have you done? But what have you done to agitate for change? Have you mobilized communities? In what way? And how effective have you been?
We mobilized community. I think our last mobilization meeting was in 2020, towards the end of the year, where we have taken the whole entire Gauteng to the Union building, where we outcry about the service delivery in the main in particular, where people are not being get services. And the city, in all sphere of government, they are expecting people to pay rates and taxes on services that are not there. So as Sanko, we are even calling to the government, especially to National Government Copter and the Minister of Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, to say, can't you draw us on board? Because there was this thing called district model, where we're expecting that as the role player, as the stakeholder, will be part of these processes. But
aren't some of your comrades in positions that matter already in Parliament? You know, deputy speakers. Yeah, I mean, they are all over the place in provincial governments. So when you call on other people, why aren't you calling on your own comrades who are, in positions that matter?
You are quite right. You are quite right. We are making a call to our own comrade because of currently our own deployed comrade. They are big-headed. I must be honest.
Okay.
They don't listen to what the poor community are saying. What they know, they will come to us local government election or national elections to expect people to elect them. We are getting it very difficult even now just to communicate with the mere minister on the issues that are affecting community. Come I say, people are still stuck. There are no houses. We are raising this concern. We are making noise. We are writing letters. We are requesting them to come and account. There is no accountability.
Okay.
Because what they know, yes.
Okay, I've got to stop it there. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I'm going to ask both Mr. Somyo and Mr. George for quick last words. What can South Africa expect? Can't this audit of 2021 be a turning point for local government? Mr. Somyo?
Yes, indeed, Vuyo. The audit, as it has been received, it relates to the true status of local government in general.
How do we make it a turning point?
And indeed, that's what we are at. If you look into what the Parliament is programming currently as a matter of urgency, to ensure that all people would see that we seek to govern in reliance of the organs which ought to benefit the entirety of society.
Mr. George?
And in this matter, to make our government accountable.
Quick last word from you, Mr. George. How do we turn things around?
At the core of the turnaround strategy, is about ensuring that 2021 political parties assist the local sphere to ensure that they bring on board the quality leadership that will be central to appreciating and being equal to the task at hand. We believe that will be an 80% tone to deal with the issues of stability, the complexity. If you look at our municipalities, about 27% of our municipalities, 27 municipalities, they hold about 75% of the GDP of our country. That is quite significant in terms of scale and complexity. And many of our municipalities, about 60% of them have got budgets that are quite significant in the country. So if we get the right leadership, we implement consequence and accountability, we will no doubt turn the corner and ensure that we extract accountability and we support where there's a need to provide support.
Thank you so much. Mr. Abraham Mashishi, 10 seconds is all you've got. Quick last word from you.
Thank you very much. I hope that as we can work with a collective part of the civic being part of their decision-making body, will achieve what we want, because we are grounded, we know what our community needs. Thank you very much.
That's where we're going to leave it. Thanks to all three of you, gentlemen. That's all we had for you this evening. To join us again tomorrow evening, same time. This is the Watchdog.